Prima Media's Mining Weekly is interviewing Roland Tatnall, the Managing Director Energy at Exxaro Resources and Synergy, with Exxaro being best known as a major coal mining company and Synergy being a wholly owned Exxaro renewable energy company with solar and wind energy operations. Roland, earlier this month, Exxaro made headlines by securing the successful registration of 80 megawatts of power for the Leplis solar power project for use at Exxaro's Grootegeluk coal mine in Limpopo. Music to the ears was that the National Energy Regulator of South Africa granted this registration in a record 47 days. So Roland, what does the approval for the registration of Synergy's 80 megawatt at Leplis solar power project mean for Exxaro Resources?
It's actually quite significant. So it's obviously a major milestone, but the approval process was in process anyway. And I think the most important aspect is the 47 days. So this is a registration or a licensing process that historically would have taken anything up to a year. And after the Schedule 2 changes at governmental level last year, NERSA has managed to bring forward registration processes to under 2 months, which I think is quite incredible. And the 47 days was something that we didn't actually expect. We expected it to be a little bit longer, but it's a big milestone for us.
What role do these kinds of projects have in accelerating Exxaro's target of carbon neutrality by 2050?
Our renewable strategy within Exxaro that's being executed by Synergy is very much the key driver at this point for carbon neutrality. A project like Leplis solar project, just one project, not including wind or any other types of renewables that can reduce emissions further, can reduce emissions within a 2-year period or so by about a third. That's scope 1 and scope 2. So it's quite a significant driver for our drive towards carbon neutrality. When we add additional phases, so for example, we're looking at wind projects for Grootegeluk as well. We're looking at potentially 60% plus of scope 2 carbon reductions. And then latterly, we'll be adding energy storage as well. We could be getting up to sort of 80-90% of scope 2 emissions reductions through our renewable strategy.
And what plans has Exxaro put in place to begin the just transition journey? And what have been the major challenges there?
Yeah, so that's not just a topical question. I think it's one of the most pressing questions for the country. When we restarted the Synergy strategy to help decarbonize our portfolio, but also look at the broader South African environment, we realized that we couldn't just drive renewables with a purely commercial imperative. We're really at an inflection point in terms of the way that electricity is generated and transported in South Africa. And so it was really a view from our perspective that the just transition needed to be a part of our strategy. And that was actually the rationale behind the MOU that we signed with Eskom last year, where we made an agreement to jointly pursue opportunities to decarbonize the sector that we're both involved in. So we've actually drawn up a plan for Mpumalanga, where some of our mines are, which is one of the provinces that will be most affected by the just energy transition, or the energy transition if it's not just, that will help hopefully catalyze the renewable energy industry in Mpumalanga and help move forward that transition. So it's a really critical pillar of what we're doing at Synergy, and it's integral to how Exxaro is approaching the future as well.
And what is the future role of coal going to be in meeting the world's energy needs?
One of the reasons we embarked on the diversification strategy within Exxaro, from coal to new minerals and renewable energy, was because of the understanding that although coal still provides a significant part of the energy generation capacity in South Africa, and will do for years to come, there is a runway associated with it. And at some point that demand for coal, both locally and internationally, will not be as strong as it is at the moment. And so we're looking to diversify to ensure that we keep Exxaro as a sustainable company going forward. Now, in terms of the timelines for that decline in demand for coal, we're not projecting what those are. We're just saying that we need to be a part of the transition. We're not blind to the fact that although coal provides 85% of the power generation mix in South Africa at the moment, that's not going to be the case, even with the government's IRP, Integrated Resource Plan, going forward. So we need to make sure that we're part of the solution in terms of the transition that you were referring to earlier.
So, Roland, what is the current contribution of Synergy in terms of wind energy and solar plants?
So, Martin, the Exxaro Renewables journey actually started in 2009, where we signed an MOU to develop a wind farm. And from that, Synergy was born. Synergy put 229 megawatts of wind power across 2 facilities onto the grid in 2016. And then in 2018, we started developing 9 off-site or off-grid distributed generation solar facilities dotted around the country to supply communities around the country with renewable energy. And the reason we did that was to understand the regulatory processes that we would need to go through as we grew the largest energy portfolio that we had in mind. So we now have 11 assets under management, combination of wind and solar. The 2 wind assets supply renewable energy to Eskom, and the 9 solar assets to private off-takers dotted around the country. And then obviously we have Leplis solar project, which will be the next large project that we'll bring into operations, that we'll start constructing next year. But we have 200 megawatts of projects for our own generation, a combination of solar and wind that we're in advanced stages of development at the moment. A lot of that's actually going to be in Mpumalanga to aid in catalyzing that just transition that I talked about. But we're also talking to a number of third-party customers, large industrials and mining companies, to provide bespoke solutions for them. And we think we've got quite a strong sort of competitive advantage in this space. We've been designing bespoke non-REAP solutions for the last 4 years or so. We're doing it for ourselves. We can combine all of the technologies to provide a solution that's right for any off-taker, large or small. So we're looking to expand the portfolio quite considerably over the next 5 years or so.
Because of your great insight into mining, what has been the response of the mining companies to your offer, and what sort of industrial needs are coming through, and even commercial needs?
Right. The mining industry over the last, I would say, sort of 18 months or so, maybe 24 months, has really sort of turned a corner in realizing that it needs to decarbonize, and there have been a number of RFPs in the market. That slowed down a little bit, I think, over the last sort of 6 to 9 months, because the procurement processes of miners are often not geared up to the specificities of the way renewable energy is generally procured. And I think miners started to understand that. So a lot of the conversations we're having are really about this sort of partnership approach, where, as we're saying, we speak the same language. We're both miners. We're also doing it for ourselves. We're procuring both wind and solar for ourselves. We understand how to look at your requirements, your demands, and we understand how to put a package together. And we're having those bilateral conversations to try and approach the decarbonisation, the cost savings in terms of the provision of renewables with a partnership approach. But it's a groundswell of change that's only going in one direction. And if you look at what the CSIR has put out there in terms of numbers, in terms of the demand of capacity that's required for the large industrial sector and the mining sector, it's about 15 gigawatts and 5 gigawatts respectively. But when you place that in a renewables environment, the actual requirement for renewable installations is between 2.5 and 3 times those numbers. So if we're talking about 15 gigawatts of current Eskom capacity that's dedicated to the industrial sector, it's actually in the region of 35, 40 to 90 gigawatts of renewables that needs to be built over the coming decade or so. So there's a massive demand for the types of solutions that we're offering in the market.
And I just wanted to get your insight into green hydrogen. You know, we see Anglo-American using green hydrogen for mobility. They use the excess renewable energy that's generated to create the green hydrogen. Have you got any thoughts around that?
We have. I think, unfortunately, South Africa as a country is a little bit behind in terms of its planning for green hydrogen, because it really is a scale commodity. But the way that we're seeing the renewable sort of revolution that's happening around the world is that South Africa has a real comparative advantage in the production of green electricity, and whether that results in the flow of green electrons throughout the grid or to neighboring countries, or whether it's converted into green molecules such as hydrogen or beneficiated further into ammonia. We've got a really phenomenal opportunity in the next few years for South Africa to have a new wave of industrialization that can feed off that renewable resource that we have to generate either electrons or molecules in a green fashion and export them globally. So it's something that needs to happen at a significant industrial scale. Obviously, Sasol has been talking about it in some depth, and scale is something that's required in order to generate an export market. But internally, we also have, as you pointed out, demands internally where hydrogen could be used. So we really think that this whole green electrons, green molecule revolution could catalyze a significant directional change in South African industry. And again, form part of the just transition, or not just form part of it, be the just transition to enable South African to have a new industrial pillar.
That was Creamer Media's Mining Weekly, speaking to Roland Tatnall, the Managing Director, Energy at Exxaro Resources and Synergy.